Hello and welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Nicole and today we are going to talk about what's on my shelf. As in, like, what types of books I have on the shelves behind me. So, this is a series that I started last year or pretty close to when I first started my BookTube channel. And I haven't done a video in this series in a while, partially just because I moved and then all my books were packed up, yada, yada, yada. If you know, you know. But anyway, I'm back. Clearly, my books are on shelves now, and it's easier to talk about them. And so, this is sort of my deconstructed way of doing a bookshelf tour and giving you an idea of the types of books that I read and that are on my shelves. And today's topic is going to be philosophical fiction. So, let me share with you what I found is the definition for philosophical fiction. Philosophical fiction includes stories that are devoted to the discussion and discursive philosophy. They tend to make you think about the purpose of life, ethics, morals, arts in life, and usually have something to do with the human experience as well, and sometimes on the dark side of that. And this made sense to me that I had a book on my shelf that was like this. In fact, I had a couple of books on my shelf that were like this, and I had a couple of books I learned that I had already read that were in this genre. So let me share first some of the books that I've read that were included in this genre. That would include any of the stories by Edgar Allan Poe tend to fall into this genre. The speculative fiction Never Let Me Go, the modernist fiction Zeno's Conscience or To the Lighthouse, Candide, 1984, War and Peace, Animal Farm, The Picture of Dorian Gray, all of those can technically be considered philosophical fiction. And the more I thought about it, I was like, oh yeah, I definitely could see how some of these books literally just almost have essays in them that are like exploring some philosophical idea, or they definitely have themes that explore some ideas that come up in philosophy, that kind of thing. So, of course, I didn't leave it there. I decided to figure out how many other books do I have on my shelves that would be considered philosophical fiction. And after doing some research, I actually found a flowchart. That's right, a flowchart. A flowchart of philosophical fiction and how to figure out what type you might want to read and like the little different categories or subgenres, if you will, that philosophical fiction can fall into. Because if you notice from the list I mentioned, some of that included speculative fiction, modern writing, as well as there's classics, all sorts of things. So I will leave a link in the description box below so that you can go ahead and see the flowchart yourself. I'll put it up on the screen real quickly if I can. But this is a flowchart that was actually created by a professor, and I'll put his name and information on the screen. And I just thought it was really fun. And I found that I had way more books on my shelves that fall into these categories than I thought I did. So I'm going to share them with you, and maybe you've read some of them, or if you like philosophical fiction, these will, maybe this will be a good TBR for you to work off of or get some other books that are like it. And the other thing that I'm going to do, I'm not going to describe what all of these books are about because there's a lot of them over here on the couch with me, but I will tell you what categories they fall into on this flowchart. So let's go ahead and get going. So there are all sorts of categories. I mentioned Edgar Allan Poe. That was considered philosophical fiction. That is a story, but falls into a category of disturbing stories. Along with that would also be Franz Kafka's stories. So these just strike me as stories that are strange and unusual, but are still discussing a lot of philosophical ideas. The Tartar Steppe. And this is by Dino Buzzati and just sounds really fascinating. And I was excited to learn that not only is this considered philosophical fiction, but that this professor thought it was one of the most underrated books in that genre. The next book I feel like is one that everybody has at least heard of at this point, and it's just a story that involves philosophy students, and that would be The Secret History by Donna Tartt, considered by many to just be a dark academia book. Now, for those of you who might possibly be interested in just getting into pure philosophy and don't mind if your book reads somewhat like an essay, apparently the most pure and uncut version of that would be The Man Without Qualities. This is actually volume one of a two-volume set. It is a very large book, very long, which is something that I like. Now knowing that it reads more essay-like, I'm not sure how I feel about that though, because I tend to like my stories to read like stories. So in that case, I might do better with a book that is prefiguring some philosophical ideas or some philosophers and that would be The Magic Mountain by Thomas Mann. According to my notes, this prefigures Heidegger or Cassirer, neither of whom I know. But it's good to know that because I'll probably look up their philosophy after or during the reading of this book. The flowchart also suggests that if you like science fiction, there's some philosophical science fiction in there for you as well. This particular book, though, falls into the weird zone, and that would be Dulgren, which was considered to be both philosophical fiction, sci-fi, as well as urban sci-fi. So it does sound like something I'd really enjoy, so I'm not surprised it's already on my shelves. Another work that could also be considered speculative fiction would be A Clockwork Orange. I have heard all sorts of things about this book, but never thought of it as philosophical fiction, so I thought that was interesting to see it on this flowchart. I am also all for people having existential crises, and especially in my stories. And so I wasn't surprised to see on there some Russian lit because I feel like that is what goes on in Russian lit a lot. And so two works that I had on my shelf were The Death of Ivan Ilyich by Leo Tolstoy. This is a collection of short stories, but specifically this title story is the one that features a character and the idea of existentialism. And there's also The Brothers Karamazov, which I feel like is the one that most people would think of, because Dostoevsky, definitely a lot of philosophy in his works. I've yet to read any of his works, but that's what I hear all the time. But if you perhaps have read some of those works and maybe want some more recent works of existentialism, which I'm all for both, you could read The Woman in the Dunes. This is a work of Japanese fiction, and apparently the person in here faces some sort of existential crisis, which, based on the little bit I know about that book, I could see that. Or you could also read 2666. If you're looking for philosophical fiction in a certain time period, I personally like to read topics over a variety of time periods. I have both works of modern and postmodern fiction. For modern fiction, that would be Swan's Way. Postmodern would be Gravity's Rainbow. As I've noticed in general that of the books that I've read that fall into the modernist time period versus postmodern lit, I tend to be favoring postmodernism. Go figure. For readers that tend to prefer discussions of history or like there to be some sort of complication of history involved in their philosophy, then you could read Name of the Rose, which takes place in the Middle Ages, or you could even go with the Satanic Verses, which also has to do with religion. A more contemporary work of philosophical fiction that deals with the topic of marriage would be the book Mating. Which, yeah, I guess we could figure that out from the cover. So that is almost it. Those are all the books that I own that appear on that flow chart, but I do actually have a couple of other works of philosophical fiction. So I will share those with you as well in case, again, this is a topic that interests you. Now, I can't say whether or not I would like any of these books. These are all on my TBR or to be read list. So these are all books that I am looking forward to reading, but it was interesting to see the variety of sort of subgenres they would fall into according to the flowchart. Other books that I have that are considered works of philosophical fiction include Ishmael, Notes from the Underground, Sophie's World, Crime and Punishment, because of course there's got to be more Dostoevsky, Atlas Shrugged, which I feel like is one that most people would think of when they think of this genre. And the one that's actually on my TBR for this month and kicked this whole idea off, The Alchemist. So I am really excited and interested in getting to this now that I know a bit more about the genre. And yeah, I can't wait to see what I think. I've intentionally not looked up to see what type of philosophical discussion goes on in this book. I only know a little bit about the setup of the book, so I'm looking forward to exploring it and see where I fit this in and see if I can figure out where I feel like it would belong on that flowchart. At some point after I've read a handful more of these books, I'm also going to do a video on hit or miss. So basically tier ranking or something like that, my favorite philosophical fiction versus those that like just didn't work as well for me. I can say of the ones that I mentioned at the beginning of the video of having already read, they were all 5 or 4 stars for me. I don't think there's any other genre I've thought about and covered so far in my channel that I've had all 5 and 4 stars. So I have very high expectations of this book. I'm thinking it's going to be at least a 4-star read. And same thing for all of these. I'm expecting that I will find just about all of these to be 4 stars. So that is something that I have to look forward to. If you would like to hear more of my thoughts on this topic or any other like it, or you just want to hear more about the books I have on my shelves, be sure to like and subscribe, and you will, yeah, get more announcements on when my next videos come out or whatever that does and helps you with. I'm so bad at promoting my own channel. Anyway, thanks for watching. Let me know if you've read any of these books and if you've liked them. Let me know if you have ideas of any more books that you feel like would count as philosophical fiction, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye.